Hi guys, this is Kumar Kurtiwada. In this video, we will learn about Angular 19 input APIs. So these are something like signal based APIs. Still, we can use our previous decorators which are provided by previous Angular versions, that is @input decorator, but these are something like signal based input APIs. If you really want to go with a reactivity approach for better performance, it is always recommended to go with input signal based. And if you want to follow the legacy approach, you can go with @input decorators. As of now, they are not yet deprecated, so you can use that at any time. But Angular team is recommending us to use signal based approach as they are giving a better performance. So let me quickly jump into Visual Studio Code. So now what I'll do is I have created Angular version 17. In this version 17, I'm running our application by using ngserve. I have created this project by using a regular command of ng new project name and hit enter. You will prompt with some set of questions, and once you are answering for all that questions, this Angular project will be created with our boilerplate code. And once you hit ngserve, then you will be seeing such output which is running at localhost 4200. This is normally for all the versions what we do. So now let me remove all the code in the app.component.html and let me write h1 tag which indicates input signal based. I'm just writing input signal based and save this. Now if you see, there is an import which is unused. That means I have removed all the code. So route-let dependency has been removed. Hence this import is not needed and it is throwing an error. That means let me go into our app.component.ts and let me remove it and save this. Now I have removed the dependency. And also sometimes we'll be seeing this problem where my application is not using a module resolution of node. Instead, it is using a bundler format. So whenever you use a bundler format, it will be showing something like this. If you really want to use something related to node, then it is always recommended to go into tsconfig, and inside this you have a bundler. Let me remove the bundler and add a node approach for module resolution. Once you add this, you can see your components will be normal. That means whenever you see that bundler format, try to change it to node format, then automatically this will be solved. Now what I'll do is, there is no error over here. Let me try to create an input decorator. If you want to use an input decorator, you need to have a child component. So let me go into the new tab and create a component for our child component, which is again a standalone. As I mentioned, standalone became a default one. Whenever you type something or create some component, it automatically creates as a standalone. So here if you see, the component is not having a standalone property, but still this is a standalone component. Why? Because that is where Angular 19 introduced a stable default of standalone component. Previously it is not like that. Whenever you create a component, if you want to make it as standalone, you have to add this property called as true. But now whatever the component you are trying to create, that will be by default standalone. If you don't want to use it as standalone, you have to explicitly make standalone as false, something like this. So then only you can use this component as a normal component and not as a standalone component. So let me remove this. Now let me try to create a component called as ngGenerate component, and the component name is child, and I want to skip the test cases. So skip tests and hit enter. Now it created a child component, and that child component I want to use in our app.component.html. So if I want to use that in app.component.html, then our ts file should import that component. As this is a standalone, I can import directly inside the component decorator itself, and let me import it as a child component and save this. Now if you go to node, again it is showing a warning because you have imported it but nothing is used from that component. Let's consume that component by using its selector. Let me copy this selector and now go into imports, and this is my app child, and save this. Now you are not seeing that warning. So let me go here, and now you can see child works. Let me zoom a bit. Now you are able to see child works. What I want to do is I want to pass some data from my parent to the child component. So how we can do that? We can do that by using input decorator. So let me go into child component.ts and create an input decorator @input, and I'm just trying to create one variable or I can make it as label, which is again a string format. I don't have any default value, hence I can use not, because I'm not initializing any value for this. So let me copy this label and let me go into HTML. Let me show here as paragraph and label and save this. Now go here, the label is empty because we are not passing any data and it is not having any default values. Now what I'll do is I'll just pass some data from my parent component, that is app.component.html, as a label is equal to, I want to pass some data, something like Techshareskk, and save this. Now you can see that Techshareskk inside our child component. Now if I want to make this as mandatory, then how I can do that? By using a property called as required as true. What is the purpose of this required? As we learned in the previous video, the required is nothing but whenever you don't pass or whenever you consume this child component, you have to pass this particular value, otherwise it will throw a warning. So now what I'll do, let me go here and I'll not pass this label and save this. Now you can see there is an error mentioning that required input label from component child component. That means child component requires a property called as label, so please pass it, otherwise I cannot go forward. That is the error which we are seeing. So let me make it as label Techshareskk. Again the error gone. Let me go here and you can see that Techshareskk. So this is how you can pass your data into your application by using input decorator. Now if I want to convert this into a signal based approach, how we can do that? It is very simple. Let me comment this and I'll use something called as label, the same variable name is equal to, I'll use input, which is again imported from @angular/core, but this is a smaller case, that is complete lowercase. So now I'll use this as a signal value. So let me save this. But you have to understand, whenever you are creating any signal based approach, it is always having a setter as well as getter value. So how can I consume this value is by using a getter method. So whenever you utilize this particular variable, you have to call it, instead of using directly like a variable, you have to use a getter function. So let me go here and you can see the Techshareskk output. Now we have the same approach of detecting these input values, or if you want to make this as a required value, you can make like dot required, and now this input signal is a required property. So let me go here and let me remove this, save this. Now you will be seeing an error, same like before, it is unrequired input. So let me do Ctrl Z, save this and go here and you can see the Techshareskk. So that is how you can pass your required value to your input signal based value. Now if you want to give the default value for this, you can pass it as a first variable. So let me use something like this or like this and save this. Now you can see there is something like options where you cannot pass this as a direct value. Instead, if you want to pass a default value, you can pass something like this. Whenever you pass it as a required, it is not allowed to pass a default value, but whenever you pass it as a not required, then you can pass a default value. Let me save this and let me go into app.ts, save this. Now everything is working as expected. So now there is one more approach to transform your value. So whenever you want to transform the input property, then you can use one more property called as transform. So that transform is also possible with your input decorator, and that transform is also possible with your input signal based values. So now what I'll do is I'll add one function, and that object will contain a transform property which will receive a function. So let me add a function, and the function is nothing but uppercase. This is my function which will receive a value which could be a string or undefined. So whenever it is a string, if the value exists, then return value dot to uppercase. I'm converting into uppercase and returning the value. Else I want to return as it is. I don't want to transform anything and I will return only the value. Let me copy this uppercase, just transform this value with uppercase and save this. Now before rendering, this input will transform, and then it will start rendering. Let me go here. You can see Techshareskk is in capital letter. So whenever you want to pass a data and if you want to transform for display purpose, then you can transform that values, not only for the display purpose. For example, I'm passing some centimeters and you want to showcase in the meters, then you can use that conversion logic inside this transform. That is even possible with our input decorator. Let me comment this, and here let me add a transform with uppercase, and this also works the same way. Let me go here. You have a string has no call signature, so let me go here and let me go into our child HTML, because there should be no calling as it is a normal input decorator. Let me save this. Now you can see here Techshareskk. That means whenever you are using a signal based, you will call it. Whenever you are using a normal variable, you will not do that. So let me remove this and enable this, save this and save this. Now, for example, whenever I am trying to use this input decorator, if you want to listen to the changes of that input decorator, what we'll do is we will use ngOnChanges lifecycle hook. So let me uncomment this and comment this. Now let me go here, save this and save this. So now what I'll do is I'll try to capture some values of this particular input decorator when there is a change in the input decorator. So for that sake, what I'll do is I'll implements on changes, and here I'll use ngOnChanges lifecycle hook. I'll use this ngOnChanges lifecycle hook, and inside this I'll listen to the event which is of simple changes, and let me console this console.log of event. For the first time you will get that event, and let me go here and inspect console and refresh. So now you can see there is a label which is our property name, and it has a current value, whether it is a first change or whether it has a previous value or not. We have all these values, so you can see all the values in this simple changes. But for example, let's consider you have multiple input decorators, then you have to check each and every event value with that specific property. For example, in this case I have to check whether I'm getting an event with the label change or not, then I have to use it. But this is again something like key based. So now I'm using a simple change, and that simple change should have this label. Then only you go inside and do some set of transformation or any of the operations when there is a change in the input decorator. For example, let me write console.log of, I want to use event here. When there is a change in the label, then I want to show that label value. Now what I'll do is inside this I'll try to use a transformed input label is equal to empty, and now I want to use this something like this dot transformed label value is equal to, I want to use transformed label, and I want to add the value, that is event dot the current value. So event of label, you will be getting a label value followed by current value. So this is how I want to add some set of label values. So now I want to use this label value in my HTML. So how can I use it? I will use a paragraph where I'll be using this transformed input label. Let me go here and you can see the transformed label and followed by Techshareskk. So this is how you will be listening to the changes happened on this input decorator whenever you are using an input decorator directly. But how we can do the same thing by using a input signal based approach. So let me uncomment this and comment this. Now we will not use any ngOnChanges. So let me comment this as well. But what I will do is I have this label. So now this label should be applicable. Let me comment only this part and save this. Now you have this label which is a signal based. So let me go here and use this signal based value, save this. Now you have this value which has to be listened. That means the label, whenever there is a change in the label of a signal, then it has to be listened. By using this signal, we have one function called as computed property. So computed property helps us to change or transform when there is a change in the value of a signal. So let me use computed property coming from Angular core, and it will receive a callback function, and that callback function should return this value. So let me copy this and put it over here. Instead of doing like this, I'll make something like this, and I'll remove all the values, dollar, and then I'll be using this value, and the value is something like label of, and save this. So what is the advantage of this computed value? Whenever there is a change in the dependencies of this particular function, then only the value will be called and then only the value will be triggered. So what we are seeing over here, transformed input label is throwing an error, because whenever you are using a computed property, then automatically our label will become a signal. So whenever you want to consume the signal, you have to use a getter function. Save this and go here. Now you can see all are working as expected. So let me go here, transform label with Techshareskk with our signal based. So everything whatever you are doing in input decorator is also possible in our signal based, but the way of usage and the consumption of the variables or the consumption of the values will be very easy whenever you are using a signal based approach. So in signal based approach, no need to manage on changes, and we should also no need to write such conditions. Instead, it automatically takes care about what the values are dependent on this computed value. If you have two or more input signals, then in that case it automatically listens for the both of them, and it will change the computed property automatically based on the values changed on that particular input signals. So that's how you can use your input signals in our Angular application. So I always recommend you to use this input signals in a for your higher performance, for the higher performance of the application. So now we also spoke about one of the case, like converting already existing input decorators into signals. How we can do that? We can do that very easily. Let me comment this and let me uncomment this, remove this, save this, and also let me remove this and I'll use something like label, save this. Now I have a component that is input decorator. I have an input decorator inside a component. Now what I want to do is I want to convert this input decorator into signal based approach. So as I spoke in my previous video, that they have given a migration commands to do this. How to do that migration command? Let me go here and execute the migration command. That is nothing but ng generate @angular / core colon signal hyphen input. I want to change only input, so I'm using input migration. So if you run this command, you can convert the input decorators automatically into signal based. So you can see here my value is label now, and my input decorator is also label. Now whole this HTML and CSS will be automatically converted into input decorator. So let me hit this and it will ask which directory you want to migrate. I want to migrate whole application, so I'm using // directly. So I will use enter, and now you can see, do you want to migrate as much as possible, even it may break your build? So it should not take that option. It's up to you. If you want to break your build, you can use S. If you don't want to break your builds, you can use no. But here it is very simple, so I can use S or no. Why? Because it's not a very big application. So I'll use no and hit enter. Now it is analyzing it and it is migrating the values, and also it added a to-do list. So you can see here, to do notes from the signal input migration. Input type is incompatible with transform. The migration added an any transform. So it is always a proper case values, as we didn't add this specific casing values, so it automatically added these values. If you want to add explicitly this particular type conversions, you can do that. So it is making a strict type for our input signals, and it has updated this particular value. If you see here, read only, because signals are always read only because it has two values, one is getter and the setter. So now this input decorator has been added, and you can see the transform function, which is having an uppercase function. So here this is a function, and now it is returning a value called as any. If you want to return a specific value, you can mention a return type over here, and now that will be a signal. Now the signal will be called by using a getter function. Here you can see here this parenthesis has been added by the migration itself. So it has updated two files, one is the TS file and the HTML file. So that is how you can use your migration command, which helps us to convert all our input signals or all our input decorators into input signals. So it is a very easy format of converting from input decorator to input signals, which are provided by Angular 19. So one command can convert whole your input signals, input decorators into input signals. Hope this gave you a glance and clear understanding of new features which has been introduced by Angular 19. Hope you like my explanation. If you like my video, like, share, subscribe to my channel for more updates. Signing off. Thank you.